few years ago, my older brother passed away. Shortly before his sudden death, he had moved into an off-the-grid cabin in a semi-abandoned logging village deep in the Maine woods. He bought the property from the previous owners for dirt cheap. His death was completely unexpected. He wasn't sick and never complained about his health. He was a cheerful guy who just wanted to live away from civilization. But the circumstances of his death were deeply disturbing. His body was found on a dirt road leading to the village. He was missing his left leg, and his face was frozen in a grotesque grimace of pure terror. The local authorities concluded he was the victim of a brutal bear attack. Even then, a worm of doubt crept into my soul. My brother never stepped foot in those woods without his hunting rifle. Yet no rifle was found near his body. I couldn't logically explain his bizarre death any other way. I buried my brother. As his only remaining relative, I inherited that cheap cabin. On one sunny Sunday, I decided to drive up to the village. The town had no name. It was officially listed in country records as condemned. There were no road signs, so I navigated using coordinates. I arrived around noon. It consisted of crumbling, rotten houses, pathways overgrown with weeds, dead gardens, and leaning fences. But the most overwhelming impression was the absolute crushing silence. There were no birds chirping, no wind rustling the leaves. The village consisted of 2 small blocks. The perimeter was enclosed by a massive wooden fence with only one entrance. The block where my brother's house stood was to the left of the gate. I decided to walk around the entire block first, inspecting this strange and gloomy area. Suddenly, I heard a sharp squeak. It sounded exactly like a metal saw scraping against a rusty pipe. The source was an open window in one of the neighboring houses. I saw a freight curtain swaying slightly and realized why the sound was so unnerving. Besides my own footsteps and the rustling dry grass, it was the only sound in this entire place. I got this heavy sensation that someone was watching me from the shadows. After a short walk, I finally gathered the courage to inspect my brother's house. It was a 2-story cabin. On the first floor, right past the entryway, was the kitchen. On the dining table sat a plate of half-eaten roasted potatoes, giving off a savory aroma. I cautiously took a fork and took a small bite. The potatoes were piping hot. The very second I put the fork back down, a sound echoed from the hallway. A small metal ball, about an inch in diameter, bouncing down the wooden stairs from the second floor. It hit every single step before rolling across the floorboards and coming to a stop right under the chair. I pulled the chair back to pick it up, but I didn't find the ball. I inspected the bottom of the chair, but I didn't see the ball this time either. It had completely vanished. I started feeling deeply uneasy. I had absolutely zero desire to go up to the second floor to investigate. I decided that 15 minutes in this village was more than enough for me. I glanced down at my watch to check the time. It was already 1:30. It was impossible that I had been there for an hour and a half, but the hands on the clock showed exactly that time. Suddenly, a deafening stomping and crashing erupted from right above my head. It sounded as if 10 heavy men had simultaneously jumped out of their beds on the second floor. Pure blinding panic seized me. I sprinted out of the house. I threw a quick glance at the spot where I had parked my car. To my absolute horror, it had been moved. It was now parked completely outside the block, in the different part of the village. I was running away from that damn house, but something was already coming down the stairs to greet me. probably exactly the way it had greeted my brother. As I ran past the front of the house, I glanced back at the window and saw it. It had an unnaturally square face. Right in the middle was a tiny nose, and below it a gaping maw. There were no eyes on its head at all. I bolted toward the car like a bullet. As I jumped into the driver's seat, the creature stepped out of the front door. It looked like a deformed humanoid, missing its left arm, but with a grotesquely muscular right arm. This massive arm wasn't growing from the shoulder, but protruding horribly from its shoulder blade. I slammed on a gas pedal and sped past it. I was driving away in a state of absolute shock. After putting some distance between myself and the village, I checked my watch. It was 10 minutes to 4. Time was completely broken. At exact 4 o'clock, I pulled off the dirt road onto the main highway. I pulled over to the shoulder, opened the door, and fell to my knees in the grass, violently sick. I stared back in terror toward the turnoff leading to the village. Ever since that day, I only sleep with the lights on. I put the house up for sale the exact same day, asking for half the price my brother paid. I explicitly wrote that it required major renovations. A buyer appeared, a young pair of newlyweds wanting a secluded honeymoon. The price was so attractive that they gladly agreed. A month after the sale, I received tragic news. The young bride was brutally murdered out there. Her eyes had been completely scratched out, and her husband had lost his mind. The property was immediately seized by the state. Investigators came to my house, but I lied. I answered that I had only been there for a few minutes and knew nothing. Today, that entire area is some kind of restricted military or government facility, completely surrounded by barbed wire fences. People on the internet write that there is a massive magnetic anomaly zone there. On Google Earth satellite maps, that specific spot just shows an endless, dense forest. What is actually going on out there right now, I don't know, and I never want to know.